Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Jimmy here with another great video for you guys regarding photography. Today we're going to be getting into a certain term that I hear gets thrown around quite a bit, and that term is the term RAW, R-A-W. Now, what happens is a lot of people are just taking things at face value and repeating them like a parrot to other people who also shoot with these kinds of cameras, and they're saying, if you're not shooting in RAW, you don't really know what you're doing, or I shoot in RAW, how about you? And guys, if you don't know what RAW means, stop spreading around this misinformation. RAW is a certain file your camera is capable of taking pictures in, but there are other alternatives, and there are positives and negatives to shooting in RAW. I tried shooting this video about 12 different times because there's so much to say when it comes to this topic, but this first one's gonna be more of an 12-foot overview about my gripes when people talk about shooting in RAW. Just so you guys know, I do not shoot in RAW 100% of the time. I shoot in RAW very minimally. I shoot JPEG for about 85% of the time. A majority of the time I'm shooting in JPEG. And there's a reason for this. I'm gonna get into this possibly in this video or the next ones. And in future videos, I'll be talking about how to manipulate RAW files and JPEGs in your camera. Now, first of all, I wanna get into why people are spreading around misinformation when it comes to RAW files. What happens is they're hearing it from the YouTube or from other forums. You should all shoot in RAW. If you're not shooting in RAW, you never will be, nor are you ever going to be a great photographer. Complete bull, okay? You can become a great photographer by shooting in any format. I don't care if you're using film, a DSLR, or whatever, okay? You can walk around taking pictures by using your eyes and kind of blinking around at people. I don't care what you do, you can still take great pictures no matter what format you're doing it in. Even a Polaroid, I don't care what you're doing, okay? What happens is they're going to classes, they're learning from instructors, and the instructors, to get more business, are showing these great pictures they're taking, and they always say, I shoot in RAW. If you want to know how to shoot in RAW like I do, come to more classes and tell your friends that they don't know what they're doing unless they're shooting in RAW. And the other friends are telling other friends to shoot in RAW, they don't know what you're doing. What happens is you don't know what you're doing when you're shooting in RAW. You might as well not be shooting it in the first place because you're doing yourself a huge disservice, okay? Let me tell you. I've seen a lot of people give up certain cameras, certain models, certain hobbies like photography in general because they don't understand why their pictures are coming out so uninspiringly so. They look at their pictures like, I'm shooting in RAW, they told me to shoot in RAW, why aren't they coming out great? It's because you don't know what RAW is, and there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. Find out and learn more about what you're doing, and your pictures will reflect that. As you become more knowledgeable, I don't know everything either, guys. I know hardly anything. I will say that right now. In fact, I learned this principle about RAW a few years ago, and I've been shooting for a long time, and I've been doing it. I'm just getting lucky all the time. That's what I was doing. So let's get into it. What is RAW? Well, the way I can best explain it to you is RAW is RAW. You're taking a picture with your camera, and it's absorbing all this information through the lens. In fact, it's taking it as much as it can so that you can manipulate the image later on your computer, for example, or on your camera. But most people just take the raw image and they put it in a computer and they manipulate it later with the parameters, the highlights, the shadows, the contrast, all these different things. Now, that's all well and good, and this is a very good thing for people who want to take pictures, let's say, for a wedding or a trade show or some event that they're working. They need to make sure they get the shot. This does not mean you can go around taking whatever crappy picture you want in RAW so you can edit it later. That's not the right attitude to have when it comes to RAW, in my opinion, okay? Now, if you take a picture in RAW, it'll come in the way it comes in, and that's why the files in .raw on your computer are so big, like 10 megabytes if not more, depending on what camera you have. Right? I shoot in JPEG, so they come out very small to begin with, and I don't like to edit them too much, so I don't need to worry about that. But if you're shooting in RAW and you're getting these huge images and you're thinking, wow, my picture's so great because it has so much information in there, not true. The composition might be off, you might have all the information you don't know what to do with, and you have to manipulate it anyway, taking up more of your time. Now, if you like doing that, I recommend shooting pictures the way they're intended, the way you meant to take them, and then editing it a little later. You'll see a lot of people in advertising take great raw pictures and they'll manipulate it in Photoshop and all that stuff and to make these amazing layered pictures. Yeah, that's where RAW really comes in because you want all that information packed in your image, in that file, so you can open it up later and see, oh, the highlights are too bright here, I'm gonna bring that down. And if you bring it down to JPEG file, you'll see that there's nothing left there. Right? Because the JPEG is not as detailed as a RAW file. In a RAW file, there's so much information there, you can lift the shadow. and say, oh, there's a little cat there. I didn't see that underneath the shadow, right? That's what happens in a raw file. If you're looking for that cat, or you see that as a, a serendipitous kind of thing, like, oh, I found a cat there. I didn't know that. It was hidden underneath the shadows. Or there's a beautiful tree behind that highlight blown out area. You can bring that down, now the tree comes into view, right? That's how detailed a raw image can be, depending on your camera. Now, if you are taking pictures in JPEG, the alternative to a raw file, there will not be nearly as much detail. There's still tons of detail with these cameras nowadays, don't get me wrong, but it's not as much detail as the raw files, because the raw files are meant to be manipulated later, whether it be in the camera or your desktop or your notebook computer on a Photoshop program, whatever. I shoot in JPEG because I see a picture before I take it, and I try to take it the best I can. If there's overexposed, blown out features there in the landscape, I'll move so there's no longer a blown out area, or I'll adjust the shutter speed so it's not as bright and blown out, or I'll do an auto exposure lock, whatever I gotta do to make that picture as is come out great on my camera, so I don't have to do too much fiddling around on my computer later. In my opinion, photography should be on the camera, not on the computer, but I do both. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe one day you want to go do a shoot for a family friend, for example, where it's not really a high pressure shoot, but you still enjoy taking great pictures. JPEG might be the right thing for you to do. You can also switch between JPEG and RAW, where RAW might be something where you want to, oh, this is a beautiful picture, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get all the information I need. So you take a few in RAW and a few in JPEG, and then you can go ahead into your computer and then adjust it later. So make sure you have that shot. Now, you can also set it to a setting where you can get JPEG and RAW at the same time. So when you open it on your computer, you'll see both copies there. You can see the JPEG, the way your camera could interpret it, and the RAW file that's completely raw from the scene that you took that you can manipulate to look like this. Here's my thing though. If you're taking a raw picture and manipulating it so much where it would look exactly the same as if your JPEG looked from your camera, why are you spending so much time editing your RAW file? Shoot in JPEG. It does all the work for you, and it has all these great filters in here so you can adjust it on the fly. That's where the magic comes in my opinion. Shooting with the camera to emulate the film of the Fuji days instead of taking it to your computer and editing it to look like what Fuji could have done. You guys see what I'm saying? So that's kind of my point. What you don't want to do, I see this all the time where people are going around, I'm going to shoot in RAW, I'm going to shoot, they're RAW robots, okay? They hear it, shoot in RAW. If you don't shoot in RAW, you're a total unprofessional, you don't know what you're doing. Guys, it's not true. You got to do what's best for you. If you have all the time in the world and you love editing things to the point where your camera can't do that part, if you're doing it black and white, your camera can do that, okay? So if you want to do it in black and white, shoot in RAW or do some crazy composites or whatever, yeah, shoot in RAW and then edit it on your computer. But what you're doing is, if you don't, what I see a lot of people doing is they're taking pictures really crappily and they don't even really care because they can just edit it later. Why? Because the justification is, well, I shot in RAW, so there's tons of information there. I don't need to shoot it great. I can just go ahead and edit on my computer. Not the way to do it, guys. What you want to do is take a picture the way you would want it to be seen, right? As close as you can. I know it can't happen in RAW all the time, but if you're shooting in RAW, especially if you're shooting in RAW, that's no excuse to just kind of aimlessly shoot, or it's underexposed, it's overexposed, whatever, just shoot it, just edit it later, and fix it in post. In my opinion, it'll save you so much time, make you become a better photographer if you shoot it right, as close to right as possible the first time, and then do some final touches on your computer later if you need to do that. Or you can edit it on your crop and edit on your camera right away. I saw this one picture recently on this one forum where this woman posted a picture of a duck wading through a pool. It was okay, or through a pond. It was fine. She showed this picture that she edited. Like, isn't it great? And I said, looks like a duck wading through a pond. Nothing special, in my opinion. It wasn't really composed all that great. The lighting looked a little edited. You know what I mean? Something's wrong with it. I'm like, oh, it's a duck. Good job, I guess. And then she showed the before picture. This, guys, you would have laughed. This, I don't mean to put down any photographers, but you can tell they didn't give a crap about taking the picture from the get-go. They had full intentions on editing it later. Now, is this an exercise in editing? Maybe, but shouldn't you focus more on taking pictures the right way and editing it to save it or do something creative with it later? If you're editing it to make it look like a regular picture, you haven't done your job as a photographer to begin with. So take a picture the way you intend it. If a duck is black, I mean like dark, and it's underexposed, Guys, move your body around, get the light on it, and use your exposure knob, open up the aperture, whatever you gotta do, get more light into your subject, to your lens, and then take your picture, and then do some final touches on your Photoshop or in your computer, whatever you gotta do. Don't just take crappy pictures because you're shooting in RAW all the time and so you can edit it later. I've harped on this enough, okay guys? If you wanna take a good picture from the get-go and you wanna test your real skills on editing, go ahead and shoot in RAW and edit it later. Why? Because if you shoot in JPEG, there's not as much information there. There's still information there. I actually edit my JPEG files, but you can't go too crazy with it. As an example, take a picture with JPEG and RAW of the same scene and go ahead and try to edit it. You'll see that the RAW comes out much better, much cleaner, and much more detail can be recovered through a RAW file than can be with a JPEG file. RAWs take a lot more time to edit, especially if all you shoot is in RAW. If you shoot in JPEG, you can go ahead and just take it at face value, and if you miss the shot, you miss the shot, but you learn as you go. There is no right or wrong way to do things. There's only a wrong way in accepting what people tell you from the get-go and just not studying more about what RAW can do for you. If that even suits your shooting style, guys. I don't shoot in RAW. I shoot in JPEG most of the time, and it suits me just fine. But like I said, if you're shooting a very important event, you might want to shoot JPEG and RAW. And there's not much sense to me in shooting RAW to make it look like something, a JPEG that can come out of your camera to begin with. Okay guys, I hope this helps you. I'm sorry for the rant, but don't take my word for it either. Explore the JPEG, explore the RAW. Don't just take what your instructor tells you and just kind of blindly shoot in RAW because people tell you you shoot in RAW, you're not a professional. JPEGs are totally acceptable and a great way to shoot and to explore your camera's colors and the functionality there. All right guys, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the subscribes, the likes, and the shares and all that stuff. I really appreciate that for sticking with me. More great videos to come, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.